from God's Unchanging Word Studios in New Orleans, we are pleased to bring you news, nuggets, and insights with today's host, Tom Carey.
Greetings, everyone, and welcome to God's Unchanging Word, another edition for our news, nuggets, and insights. And today is Friday, January 15th, 2021. We are quickly moving into our new year. Is it getting any better than 2020? Doesn't look like it so far. All right, let's get right into our program. Social media giants silencing the right. Now, that's been the topic that's been going around the globe, believe it or not, and we're going to talk about that today. That's one of the warnings the church has talked about for many, many years. We're going to pull in another segment of the cost of COVID. We're going to take another look and showing how the cost of the debt that continues to rise and how it's affecting your buying power with the dollar. Then we're going to go into the liberal left. Is it political or biblical? You're going to be surprised to see what the Bible has to say about all of that. So now let's get right into it. As President Trump leaves office, this is just going to be a couple of news shorts to begin with. Stories you haven't heard for a while that's kind of been on the back burner because President Trump has been in office. World news begins to heat up that we haven't seen for some time. Get a little news story on Iran, North Korea, and the southern border. All of these now are coming back into play, back into the news. All right, let's begin with Iran threatens retaliation before Trump leaves office. This is because of last year. Iran escalates threats as the anniversary of Soleimani strikes near. Remember last year, General Soleimani was taken out after 20 years of his terrorist reign around the globe, and particularly on the United States and Israel. So Iran is vamping up their threats for revenge for the January 2020 U.S. drone strike that killed Major General Qasem Soleimani, while the U.S. is warning of a very swift and devastating retaliation to any attack. Rouhani said President Trump had committed an unforgivable crime in ordering the killing of Soleimani, who commanded the Quds Force of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard. So that's the report that came out. As a side note, just a side note, how did that story get out? Any idea how that story got out? Have you heard about what Twitter's been doing in silencing the right? That story is out on Twitter. So I just want to bring that up as a side note when we get into the second part of the story of the hypocrisy of what's been going on in the news. Major General Mousavi, the new general, commander of Iran's army, said Thursday that Iran was posed with a hand-holding sword and a sledgehammer to strike against Soleimani's killers, according to Iran's Tasnim news agency. That means it's the United States, that they're threatening action against the United States and President Trump for taking out General Soleimani from last year. And they're anticipating they want to do it before this president leaves office. The day they're thinking that this is being escalated to is the 19th, January the 19th. So pay attention. We'll see what's going on with that. All right. Second, following the rocket attacks in U.S. Baghdad embassy in the Green Zone, this was in December, just last month, 2020. 8 rockets targeted the U.S. embassy in Baghdad. It's amazing you don't hear these stories right now. Everybody's so caught up in what's going on here in America, the changing of the guards, the fraud in the election, and all that's going on right now, so the rest of the news is not coming out. So that's why I'm bringing this to you today. 8 rockets targeted the U.S. embassy in Baghdad with the Iraq army. Rockets hit the U.S. embassy as the tensions mount ahead of the anniversary of the U.S. killing of Iranian General Soleimani. In precautionary move, the U.S. moved its aircraft carrier Nimitz and its strike force back into the region this month. All right, so that's one of the things that they've been doing this month. The U.S. also flies 2 bombers to the Middle East under the Iran deterrence mission. So what they're trying to show is they show a force that the United States is still in power and they will protect its people, its citizens, and its embassies. So all of this is taking place in the background of what's going on right now. And because of some of these things, there have been so many, I don't know if you're getting them or not, but my internet, my emails are full of the craziest conspiracy theories you've ever seen in your life. I've never seen anything this drastic since I've been in the church. But it was just, and then so many of the people in the church are just forwarding all these things like they're absolutely real. I mean, I'm not even going to get into all of them right now because there's so many. We ought to do a program on the conspiracies because some of them are so nonsense. It's just unbelievable. I mean, you have to lose your mind and think that these things are real. Now, the second story, North Korea is back in the news. North Korea threatens to build more nukes. Hadn't heard that in a while, huh? How many years have we heard that? They've been sitting out there kind of quiet. Every now and then he'll roll his head up and he'll shoot off a missile here and there. But now they're threatening to build more nukes in sites to U.S. hostility. This is out of Seoul. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un threatened to expand his nuclear arsenal to develop more sophisticated atomic weapon systems, saying the fate of the relationship of the United States depends on whether it bans its hostility policy or not. So now what he's doing, he's raising his head up, he's showing his power. He's going to test the new administration, whether he's going to follow through with what's going on, or you're just going to give in to our wishes and our demands and leave us alone and take off the sanctions. So that's what's going on right now. So in other words, let's go back to business as usual. All that's been going on, now it's all coming back. They knew there'd just be a period of time. They just buy their time. This administration would be gone. Then we'll go back to the way things were. China's saying it. Russia's saying it. Many of the countries like Iran, Turkey, and all these other countries are all saying the same thing. All right, it's back to business as usual. The next article. U.S. judge blocks the expulsions of the unaccompanied children of Trump's pandemic-related border rules. This was in January 8th of this month. The U.S. District Court judge on Wednesday blocked expulsions of the unaccompanied children caught crossing the United States as a setback for the outgoing Trump administration. U.S. District Judge Emmett Sullivan in the District of Columbia ruled that the minors were likely to suffer irreparable harm because they could be subject to sexual abuse and other violence, as well as face the possibility of torture and death if summarily returned to their home countries. So here we are. Then you're seeing now the borders now are beginning to heat up again. So as they come in, you can't turn them loose. At the same time, the new rules are they're having less beds. I don't remember exactly how many it was, but I think it was they're going to have 12,000 less beds to put people in that they catch coming into the border. And ICE has been defunded by about 40% of its funds. So what's going to have to happen is the swelling, because you can't turn people loose, you can't arrest them anymore. They'll have to write them up, give them a summons, set them a court date, and turn them loose in the United States. So that's, again, back to business as usual. And that's what's going on here. So you're going to see the rise over the next few years now of the people coming into America going to be much higher than the estimated 20 million they have today. Who knows if that'll even double in the next few years. Now, let's get into our first major story. This is big. I don't know if you realize how big this really is. Social media giants removing First Amendment rights. This includes Twitter, Facebook, Amazon, YouTube, and many others to silence the conservative right. All right? The motive here is that they're so dangerous, we can't let them have a voice. Not only can they not have a voice, we have to prevent them from talking to one another on the internet. So basically, that's what's going on here, in case you didn't realize it. The silencing of free speech, removing our culture. We began warning this in News Nuggets and Insights as early as actually 2018. So here's the first big feature story we brought back, and this is online now. You can go to our website at God's Unchanging Word, go to the section where it says Nuggets, and find the 2019 year. Click on 2019 year, and every program we did in 2019 is there. In fact, they're all there going all the way back into 2017, and I think we started late 16. If I'm not mistaken. There's a few from 2016, kind of rough. It was in the infant stages, but they were still there. Believe it or not, we started this program to do a weekly 10 minutes just update. And then it took on such a powerful mode with people writing in saying we need more. So we went to a full hour type program, and we've been doing it every week. So back in July 26, 2019, talk about removing our culture changing the way we think. That was on July 26th. Then on August 2nd, we talked about social media giants. There we are again, all the way back into July of 2019, social media giants stopping the conservative word from reaching the general public. What they were going through was a period called the normalcy period. In other words, when it becomes normal that you expect to be shut down. And you've been hearing people, right-wing, PragerU and many of the others that have absolutely no violence to them, never had any violence to them, having so much of their videos being censored because it doesn't match the culture of today. So they just cut them out. So it becomes normal. So what does that mean? It means it's against the law to be able to have a freedom of speech censored, but it happens so often it just becomes normal. This is the mode of the type of sermon I'm going to be giving this Sabbath. And it's not just about free speech, it's about where we're going in this world as we march to the return of Jesus Christ. And in that, it's going to be pre-war normalization. Because you see, you have to get people to think a certain way to be accept what's coming. We have seen that this past year with the COVID and the lockdowns. And we say, okay, everybody understands we've got to be locked down, we've got to be separated, we can't have all these things going on for the safety and security of the world. So everybody complies. So it goes from freedom all the way to obedience. And you're seeing that this year in just 9 months, 10 months, how fast things can change. This past weekend was the biggest jump we've had since the beginning of all the cultural changes. It began with the deplatforming of President Trump. President Trump had regained his access. This is from Twitter. He regained his access to Twitter after being locked out for 12 hours. Though the company had temporarily blocked the president on public safety grounds, its CEO, Jack Dorsey, made it clear, the president of Twitter made it clear publicly that he would not follow through with any more stringent measures. That's what he said. It's out there in public domain, and you can find it. He said, we only did this. They're calming down the rhetoric so we don't incite any more violence. Just hours later, President Trump was permanently banned, while at the same time the presidents of Venezuela, Turkey, and Iran have Twitter accounts espousing their hate of Israel and America. What a conflict. And I just showed you at the beginning, Rouhani threatening America that they're going to kill somebody, somebody's going to pay for this. They got a Twitter account. Can you see how this goes? If you can take the reality of the news of actually what's happened, take it out of the emotion of what people feel. If you're a left, you feel hatred toward the right because of what took place. The right has felt the hatred for many months, for years, with the attacks on Donald Trump and the narrative of Russia, which the FBI and the Secret Service have now admitted there never was anything with Russia. The whole thing was a hoax. They admit it. It's public. Everybody knows it. So you see all these things going on. So now, when you see all this taking place, when the emotion swells for what you feel is right or what's wrong, is you need to set it down, and then you need to take what's actually happening and place it against what Scripture says. There's your balance. You need to take it. So when I talk to you about Rouhani, both sides can agree that Rouhani trying to kill people in America is not good. So we can understand saying, then why does he have a Twitter account? And nobody has a problem with that. But if you continue to say, well, Trump doesn't have one and Biden does, well, then you got an argument. Neither one's right because the free speech that's going on. The people who raise up with the violence, those who commit the violence, are to be held accountable in all actions. Really? Well, then how come we went for 6 months that basically was no action with violence across America? How come in Chicago, the children keep dying and they continue to shoot so many people in Chicago all the time, every year, and it doesn't seem to get any better? All right, that's just another story. All right, let's go on. Look what Jack Dorsey said in 2015. Twitter stands for freedom of expression. We stand for speaking truth to power. We stand for empowering dialogue. Now, I mean, this pretty well stands on its own, doesn't it? What I'm going to do this weekend, and I hope you can tune in for the sermon that I'm going to give you, because you see, when Hitler took power, he espoused the same thing. Finally, we're free. People are going to be able to have better lives. The entire time, what he was doing was completely contrary to what he said. And you're seeing it going on right now. The president coming in has vowed that he wants to see peace and unity. But every action has been taking place right now with going through to follow through on impeachment will not bring peace. It will not bring unity. It will only flare up the same emotions that brought the riot last week to continue. And if people can't see that, then they're blind. They're absolutely blind for what's going on. But I'm going to show that in a context where it's not the United States. What I'm showing you, what's going on right now, is we lead to a war. And the war is a spiritual war that's going to eventually destroy this nation, because God said it would. Revelation proves that it will. And I'm going to show you that from the duality of time of pre-war Germany from 1939, from 1925, and America today, from where we are from 2015 to 2030. Absolutely amazing when you see, called pre-war normalization. I'm going to tune in this Saturday to see all of that. So now, this was so flagrantly wrong. Even the ACLU, who never supports the right, has raised their voice saying, this is wrong, what's going on? Angela Merkel, Chancellor of Germany, says Trump's Twitter eviction is problematic. The German chancellor said that although Twitter has the right to add warnings to Trump's posts, the move to permanently suspend his account raises concerns about free speech. All right, so that's just one. The Mexican president, Andres Manuel Lopez Obrador, he said he slammed the Twitter and the Facebook account for blocking Trump. He says, how can you censor someone? She said, let's see, I see the judge of the Holy Inquisition. I will punish you because I think what you're saying is harmful, he remarked. Where is the law? And that's true. Where's the law? Where's the justice system? Where's the FCC? Where is the people who are saying that this is against the Constitution, it's against the law, basically what's going on? It says, where is the regulation and what are the norms? This is an issue of government. This is not an issue for private companies. One of the biggest problems with all this, what they're censoring in this is what they declare to be hate speech or speech that riots violence, brings it up. They determine it in their own merits, and there's no standard. So when you see this and you see them doing hate speech, you say, finally, they're saying something. But let me say something here to you. What happens now when it reaches the church? Because this administration who's coming in does not agree with the fact that we preach no homosexuality. God absolutely condemns it, and unless they repent, they're going to face the repercussions from Jesus Christ. Because you see, that's going to be hate speech. And it's coming. And if you don't think it is, stay tuned for next week, because I've got another Catholic priest. You ought to hear what this guy says. I mean, he went absolutely berserk for his own parishioners who voted for Biden. Unbelievable what you're going to hear next week. I just didn't have time to bring it into this one. So stay tuned for next week's News, Nuggets, and Insights. Let's move on. The Russian opposition leader, Navalny, slammed Trump's ban as censorship. He says, I get death threats here every day, he says, and he has for many years. And Twitter doesn't ban anyone. Can you see the conflict here? Here's a guy who's a leader of one of the parties in Russia. They call it the opposition party, the largest party to the one who's in the administration's in there right now. He says, every day I get a death threat in Twitter, but nobody silences them. So you see the conflict, what's going on here? That's what's taking place right now. So now, look at this. This came across on Twitter. All right. Antifa mob attacks Trump supporters. Unlawful assembly was declared in San Diego on Saturday for violence sprang up when a mob of Antifa Black Lives Matter protesters clashed with Trump supporters during the group's Patriot March in Southern California. All right, so we want to shut them down from marching. They have no right to protest. But look what the leading banner. Ashley Babbitt deserved it. Now, for those of you who don't know who that is, that was the young lady who was shot and killed in the riots last week inside of the congressional building. She was shot and killed. And here they are, the Black Lives Matter, bringing it out on Twitter. Ashley Babbitt deserved it. So you see, I could go on and on and on and on. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to show you where we're going as far as free speech and how the damage is continuing. This is something that I'll be bringing out in the sermon. I'll just give you a little tidbit of Saturday of what's coming. America's Night of Long Knives. So what is the Long Knives? This was a newspaper article. For those who don't understand history, the quote is, for those who don't know history are doomed to repeat it. And we're in that phase right now. Now, this is a newspaper back in 1934. German newspapers. From June 30th to July 2nd, there was a 3-day purge of political dissidents intended to consolidate Hitler's powers to eliminate the anti-propaganda. We are at the beginning stages right now that we're hearing we need to purge the right. We need to silence the right. Very similar to this. Now you're saying, well, that's violence and that was in Germany. Well, yes, it was. If you don't think it can happen here, then you're sadly mistaken. There'll be a more sophisticated way of being able to silence the people, but it will be here. How did it come about? Well, the decision thought to have been made because of the fear of chaos. The fear said, well, we might have chaos. We might have problems, so we need to silence them. When they couldn't silence them, they had to eventually begin to arrest them. Did you know that Dachau was not the initial prison camp for Jews? It was for the political dissidents in Germany of Adolf Hitler. So now, we have now reached the point where we could come together and finally, listen, it's over, it's finally done. It's finally done. If we let it go, but they're not going to let it go. So what happens is, if you continue this impeachment, do you honestly think the right is going to settle down and accept this? Of course not. So what do we have? Now we have created the environment. We have set the policy to do what? Right here. Now, because we're going to do this, we think they're going to do this. We're right, they're wrong. So because of the fear of chaos, the FBI has just put out a warning now from today until Inauguration Day that there could be violence at the capitals in every state in America. So what you do is you create the violence situation and scenario. You rile the people up into an emotion of fear and threat. Now you have to go protect the people that you just riled up. So you go arrest those who can't agree with the policy. Right there. So that's what we're looking at. So you're at the beginning stages of this going on right now. How does it work? Right here. Big tech, mega social media giants moving to crush the right-wing conservatives. America's Purge of the Right Media. This was a book about the Night of the Long Knives. The Night of the Long Knives was going in for 3 days to cut out of Germany the dissidents. That's where it got the name. Many people were killed and executed. It is the history and the legacy of Adolf Hitler's most notorious purge. You're hearing in America today. Many social media, many newspapers, and TV analysts are saying there needs to be a purge in America. ABC News calls for the cleansing movement. What do you mean by the cleansing movement? Think about that. There needs to be a cleansing the movement of Trump supporters following the Capitol riots. It says you may not like it, but it's perfectly within Klein's right to say everything he said, Media Research Center Nick Kengatis wrote. In other words, you may not like that this newspaper man said this, but it's in his right. It's in his right, not the right's. What do you think if President Trump would have said, listen, we need to purge that left. We just need to get rid of everybody over there. What do you think the news media would have said? Do you understand where this is, what I'm talking here? I'm putting in front black and white of what you're actually looking at. So now, look on the bottom. I just brought that little headline on the bottom. Capitol riots will be used to deplatform Trump supporters. Right. What they're saying now is because they went too far, they broke into the Capitol, they broke the law, people were killed, violence was done. We need to use this now to begin to bring about our changes. That's what they're looking to do right now. All right, let's go on. After the night of Long Knives, whereby the incredible amount of the conservative content, including the banning of Rush Limbaugh, the deplatforming of Parler, Apple, and Android, they outright banned President Trump from his social media and closed his email campaign websites, totally silencing the 45th president of the United States from communicating with anyone via the internet. This is the president. They said, we need an example. If we can make an example of the president, we can do this to anybody in America. Anybody in America. Hope we all understand that. That's what's going on here. So now, let's put this in context, and I've got two videos I'm going to show you. Here's Parler, all right? Parler, I never heard of Parler till last week. I didn't know what Parler was. Well, Parler was the alternate of Twitter. In other words, if you didn't like to be Twitter because you were being silenced so often, go find another media. It was that simple. In other words, if Walmart says you can't shop here no more, you may not like it, you might not feel it's just, you go to another store, right? You got to go somewhere else. But what happens if they say, listen, you can't use the streets anymore? You can't use the highways to get to the store because that's the jump. Because you see, the internet has been the way of communication in modern time, just like the newspapers was, the radios and television. The internet was. But what they've done here now is that Parler now, who's another platform, you have Twitter, you can go to Walmart. You can't go to Walmart no more? Well, then go to whatever your other store is. They went to Parler. But the people who run the highways that brings you to Parler say, no, you can't use our highways no more. So you have no way to get to Parler. So they have censored everyone. Does that make sense for you? Because a lot of people don't understand how the internet works. So then they said, you can not only not use our highways, you can't use our equipment to get there. If you're on a phone, our system that runs by Apple or Android, anything that uses our highway, you can't use our equipment either. So they have completely taken control. All right, let me stop for just a second and say this. Whether you realize it or not, we're at pre-war Germany, 1925 to 1933. It was a change in the conditioning that began to change the entire media to have the people accept that what was existing in the United States, in their country, which Germany, was not good. It needed to change, and their champion was Hitler. That's what changed. The normalization began in 1933 to accept who caused it. The Jews, it was their fault, they said. And how do you take an entire nation to where they once people they loved, they now hate and blame them for everything? We're in that stage now that it's going to be brought in the United States that the people who caused all our problems are those people who hate science, who doesn't trust what's going on, who are rebelling against climate change, and they have this crazy people they call the conservative Christian. It's their fault. You're going to see that normalization beginning to take place right now. It's going to be moving far beyond right and left. It's going to be moving to where God says Satan's going after the elect. That's what all of this is. It's the foundation for the pre-war between the spirit and between Satan and evil. That's what's taking place right now. So now, this took place with President Trump. Even when his chief of staff tried to get a message out on his own account last night, this was just a couple days ago, we're taping on Tuesday, this was Sunday night, Trump, his social media account was also terminated. In other words, anything that would get the message out from President Trump that was also shut down, being shut down across. Now, I've got two videos here. Each one's about 4 minutes long on free speech. They're both by Maria Bartiromo. And first one is with a interview with CEO of Parler, and then the second was with Devin Nunes. So what I've got here to give you an idea what I'm talking about, this is showing about what happens when the person who's trying to use it to allow the message to go out, and the second is those who actually use it, who's trying to use their messaging system. What happens to both? Like, let's play the first one.
It's Sunday morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I'm Maria Bartiromo. Welcome to Sunday Morning Futures. Today, an assault on freedom and free speech. Big tech and social media move to squash conservative conversation with moves you would expect only in communist China. Censorship, information, suppression, and blacklists. Coming up, Congressman Devin Nunes on the crackdown on the free press and the impact on America. Just 24 hours after Twitter permanently suspended President Donald Trump, Google, Apple, and Amazon have now all banned Parler from their app stores, which experts say could destroy the company financially. Before its removal, Parler surged to #1 in Apple's App Store, with 1.5 million downloads on Saturday alone. Joining me right now in this exclusive interview on the telephone with reaction is the CEO of Parler, John Mates. What is your reaction and the impact to this squashing of Parler?
It's devastating is what it is, and it's an assault on everybody. I mean, they all worked together to make sure at the same time we would lose access to not only our apps, but they're actually shutting all of our servers off tonight, off the internet. So they made an attempt to not only kill the apps, but to actually destroy the entire company. And it's not just these three companies. Every vendor from text message services to email providers to our lawyers all ditched us too on the same day. And they're trying to falsely claim that we were somehow responsible for the events that occurred on the 6th.
This is absolutely extraordinary that you see this coordinated effort on the same day that the president is banned on Twitter. You've got Google and Instagram removing Parler, and now last night late, Apple removes Parler as well. What are you going to do? John, can this put you out of business?
Oh, I mean, it would put anybody out of business. I mean, they could destroy anybody. If they did this to any app, any company, it would completely destroy them. And we're going to try our best, to get back online as quickly as possible. But we're having a lot of trouble because every vendor we talk to, says they won't work with us because if the Apple doesn't approve and Google doesn't approve, they won't. And they've given us no legitimate remedy. They've tried to, ask us for, to cooperate with them on a few things. We've tried to give them everything that they wanted, of course, without sacrificing our principles, but there were remedies to do it, and they just don't care. They just don't want us on the internet. They just want to get rid of us.
So what is the reason that they are saying that they want you out? I mean, I know that the company has been incredibly successful, as many people have called out social media for censorship, for censoring news. Twitter would not run the Hunter Biden story during an election. They locked out the New York Post from Twitter. Google has created algorithms potentially that will also censor information. There's been attacks on Parler because of your open free speech approach. What is the reason that they're giving you for shutting you down?
Well, like I said, they claim that we somehow were responsible for the what they call the insurrection on the 6th, which, we've never allowed violence. We've never allowed any of this stuff on our platform. And we don't even have a way to coordinate an event on our platform. So they somehow want to make us responsible. And this seems to me like an excuse to just basically eliminate free speech at a convenient time, for them. It does, because, we've grown so much. We were #1 on the App Store the day that we were, removed for quote unquote violence. And the same day that horrible violence was trending on Twitter. And so it's an obvious double standard. It's obvious collusion. And they're doing it to stifle free speech and competition in the marketplace. And this could happen to literally anybody.
All right, so that's the side from the business side of it, who actually developed something to be able to use that people can go subscribe to and be able to get their information out. Second video is by Devin Nunes, who's actually in Congress and showing what happens on his side who actually use that platform. Let's play the second video.
Joining me right now to weigh in is Congressman Devin Nunes. He is the ranking Republican on the House Intelligence Committee. He's been battling big tech censorship for years now, and he warned about it in his book, Countdown to Socialism. Congressman, good morning to you. Your reaction to this playing out?
Be an open social media company or site for any American to get on any longer. Because these big companies, Apple, Amazon, Google, they have just destroyed what was likely, Parler is likely $1 billion company. Poof, it's gone. But it's more than just the financial aspect of that. Republicans have no way to communicate. It doesn't even matter if you're a Republican or conservative. If you don't want to be regulated by left-wingers that are at Twitter and Facebook and Instagram, where you get shadow banned, nobody gets to see you, they get to decide what's violent or not violent, it's preposterous. So I don't know where the hell the Department of Justice is at right now, or the FBI. This is clearly a violation of antitrust, civil rights, the RICO statute. There should be a racketeering investigation on all the people that coordinated this attack on not only a company, but on all of those like us, like me, like you, Maria. I have 3 million followers on Parler. Tonight, I will no longer be able to communicate with those people. And they're Americans. And by the way, unlike the fake social media sites, we know that everybody that's on Parler, because you get certified, there's a number, it's actually a very, very safe platform. And if you break the law on Parler, the FBI can subpoena to find out who those people are. If you break crimes on Facebook and Twitter, good luck. Good luck trying to find out who they are. So Parler's went above and beyond. It's one of the reasons why I didn't go to Parler, 8 months ago, because it was a Republican platform. I didn't know if it was Republican or not. I went there because I knew that I could express my thoughts freely, and that I knew that the list as I post something was going to be there, and that Facebook and Twitter weren't going to be manipulating it.
I think it's worth mentioning that Apple has not removed TikTok from its app store. You can still download TikTok. Yeah. And all of these moves certainly feel like communist China, where there is this crackdown on free speech. You are an elected official, Devin Nunes. What are you going to do about it?
Yeah, their hypocrisy knows no bounds. If you actually, I don't know if you, I just want to, it's worth repeating what the CEO just said just a minute ago. Trending yesterday in the Twitter sewer, which is a sewer. There's child pornography, foul language. That's why I don't use it. I don't promote it. I don't want my children on it. Hang Mike Pence was trending on Twitter yesterday. Now, I think that's violence. Is Apple deleting the Twitter app from the App Store? Hell no. These CEOs that are doing this should be prosecuted criminally. So look, I've been talking to many of my colleagues, Republicans on the House side, and a couple senators. We're going to look for legal options. Do we have any legal options? Do we have our First Amendment rights? Are they being violated? Can we get this? The Supreme Court, these federal judges have got to step in. That's number one. But look, legislatively, you have to understand, this is not about big tech and that they're just in Silicon Valley and they're just trying to make money. No, they're working for the Democratic Socialist Party. They're being cheered on by this. They are state-run media. And really, it's the communication system. So that's how people are receiving their information, is through this funnel of very few companies that are being controlled by the Democrat Socialist Party.
Yeah.
Now, he is the ranking member of the Intel Committee in Congress. Ranking member. Shut down. 3 million followers. Can't use them. What do you think is going to happen to the church down the road? That's why this is so important. And that's why the warnings, what we've been talking about for the church, has been there for a long, long time. Now, if you haven't signed up for the News Nuggets and Insights, if you're not on our mailing list, I'm encouraging you to do that now. because we don't know when or how long that's going to be. Things will settle down for a little while, but things will get worse, and you're going to see this escalate. That eventually, what God talked about, there will be a silencing of his word. Here's some quotes against the right to give you an idea what's coming out right now that are not being censored. It says, these are all quotes I got off headlines. I am reading calls by officials, CEOs, and tech people to totally ban all conservative content on the internet, to cancel all email accounts and ability for conservatives to communicate online, and to create a communist-styled internet, regulated internet, where only state-approved content is allowed. Here's another one. Mozilla, the parent company of Firefox browser, says it's not enough to deplatform conservatives from social media. They say they need to prevent us from being on the internet altogether, to drown out disinformation and to amplify factual voices. Here's another one. It is now a conspiracy theory to say or believe that there was election fraud. Do you know that now, in many circles, if you actually bring that up, it's election fraud, they cut you off. They take you off. Why? Because you have just incited another riot. You can't even say it anymore in many of the circles on the internet, to say or believe that there was election fraud or that the election was stolen. The militant zeitgeist raging across the internet this morning is that conspiracy theories lead to violence and harm, and therefore they all need to be shut down and not allowed, as this expert from The Hill states. This is a quote from The Hill. Now take a look at this. This is from Sarah Huckabee. It says, I lost 50,000 followers this week. The radical left and their big tech allies cannot marginalize, censor, or silence the American people. This is not China, it's the United States, and we are a free country. How about this? This was from the Washington Post right before the election. Message could not be sent. This is when they reported about the Hunter Biden laptop and all the information that was on. They actually brought out the story. They were completely censored and they couldn't send it out. It was a warning that if somebody tried to take that news article and forward to somebody, it came out it was unsafe and they shut it down. And they shut it down for the entire time that the article came out. For almost a month, the Washington Post was censored and not allowed to use the internet and to use the Twitter accounts because they said it was unfair and unsubstantiated. Meanwhile, the FBI had already said they had the laptop and it was real. All of this is going on right before our very eyes. The people on the left, they have no idea because they don't follow the news media, what's going on. Famine of the word. Look what God says here in Amos 8. He said, behold, the days come, says the Lord, that I will send a famine in the land, not a famine of bread or a thirst of water, but of a hearing of the words of the Lord. Now, I've been in the church for a lot of years, and when I remember reading this, I always thought it was strange with the way it says a famine of the hearing of the word. You know, and I tried to imagine, what does God mean by that? Maybe people just aren't going to listen because we're told that, you know, they're not going to listen to you. Go tell them anyway. But you have to wonder here if God knew when he wrote this, the time that we live in today, the famine of the hearing of the word means that we're going to be censored. God's word is not going to be allowed to get out. So you have to wonder what's going on here. Then in verse 12, God says, and they're going to wander from sea to sea, from the north even to the east, and they shall run to and fro to seek the word of the Lord, and they're not going to find it. So in other words, when things get really bad and people are going to be looking for hope and looking for some encouragement, they can't find it. One of the reasons why is they're going to be censored. God's word is not going to be allowed to get out. So you need to, if you're not on our mailing list, write in and get on it. The old-fashioned way, they call it snail mail. You know, while we still got a chance, we can at least communicate through that and send you something in the mail if they shut us down on the internet down the road. False flag events. Here's another thing. I'm going to go through this real fast, is that the FBI right now are warning everybody that next week there could be riots across the country at every Capitol building. This came out through an internal from, this was on Monday, about a huge uprising coming this week and into the election day. So starting this week and running through at least Inauguration Day, armed protests are being planned in all 50 state capitals at the U.S. Capitol, according to the internal FBI bulletin obtained by ABC. Now, I want to tell you this. I'm not in touch with them, but I get communications through a lot of conservative groups. There's nobody planning anything. all the people that I've heard about and talk in the past or send me information, this isn't existing. So we don't know where that's coming from, whether that's what they call a false flag event or not, that someone else is trying to rig again. But in other words, from those that I've seen in the conservative, the different people that are out there, and by the way, the conservative people aren't coordinated into one group like others in protest are. They're grassroots, and they're in different groups all over the place. And there's nothing out there that's been raising that alarm from the people that I've seen that's talking about this. Okay, all right, let's talk about COVID-19 and the cost. We've been talking about that off and on for the last few weeks. We brought up various aspects out of this. So does anybody really know what the cost is? I'm going to show you a cost right now that nobody's thinking about that's associated to this because we have to keep increasing the debt to keep us going here. Not last week, but the week before last, we brought out these two things. First of all was the amount that we're spending to pay the interest on the money we borrowed and the amount of money that we take in. So we showed you 2 weeks ago that in just 1 week, we spent $432 billion to pay interest on the debt that we don't have. So what they're doing is they're having to borrow money, more money, just to pay the interest. That's what we were showing just a couple of weeks ago. Here's something that you don't realize what's going on. As the debt continues to skyrocket, the dollar valuation continues to deteriorate. Now, you may not realize it, but it's happening. Did you see the price of gas lately? Isn't it amazing how all this coordinates, one administration going out, one administration coming in? Now gas is going up again. Why? Because they're going to begin trying to cut down a lot of your oil. Whether they said so or not in the election or not, it doesn't matter. They are. So the dollar, is off almost 5% in 2020, which means it could drive it down another 20%. This according to Citigroup. So the slumping dollar can expect to drop some more, a lot more is what they're saying. So if you think the dollar has lost value now, it said, just wait. According to Citigroup, some 20% the dollar value could drop next year on top of the 4.9% it has already fallen in 2020. Here is a graph. So now, if you look at the beginning, you see where it starts in the year. This is the dollar value. A lot of people doesn't follow that. So by March, things began to really escalate in way, way high. You see in the beginning of March, see the drop in that chart? That's because that's when COVID began with the shutdowns. Then, when they decided to open things back up and spend the money, more debt, the dollar just rose, it just jumped because there was just an exertion of money. When you put a couple $1 trillion into the market, it just makes things turn, all right? But look what happened for the rest of the year. The dollar value continued to plunge. Why? Because of the continual printing of money. It means that the dollar value is less. It is not worth what it used to be. As dollar loses value, the cost of nearly everything goes up. That's because everything's pegged to oil. Primarily of the oil and the oil-based products gives us less buying power on all imports. That's inflation. Now, you may not see the inflation going up, but your prices at the grocery, I'm sure you're noticing they're going up. Prices of medicines, again, starting to go up again. Another thing that happens to hide the inflation is they give you smaller packaging. You get smaller packaging for the same amount of money. That's all inflation that's taking place. Here's a dollar index showing you how it's gone from 2003 to 2020. Showing now dropping 20%. If it dropped to 20%, that the dollar value of $71.80. So now I'm going back to 2008, and look what happened in 2008. Remember the market crash. Remember what happened in 2008. We went into a deep, deep deflation of the value of everything 2008. So the dollar lost money way back then. There you have 2008. It was the beginning of the stock market crash. So now let's take it currently. Look where we've been fairly stable up and down for the last few years since this administration was in office. Now then, we get to the end of 2020. You see the printing of more money going in, just like it was early in 2008. Now we're beginning to drop again, just like we were back in the period of 2008. Almost 5 years, the dollar value stayed within $93 to $101. And then you see that, you see gas go up, and you see gas go down. And right now, we've been pretty stable for almost 5 years. If you take where we are today and you begin dropping another 20%, you're going to see it go down. The gas is going to skyrocket, and inflation is going to run rampant. DROS. What is DROS? We're talking about our dollar value. What do we mean when I compare that to DROS? I'm going to go through this. I went really too long in the other section, so I'm going to do as quickly as I can here. DROS is the ingredients inside of something that the value is. If you have something that has great value and you want it to be more, let's put it as something we can think about. If you bought a chicken, you buy a chicken at the store, it's 5 pounds. And it's a frozen chicken, but when you go home, you open it up and you find there's an extra pound of water inside the chicken. All right, we've all seen that, right? Turkeys are the same way. They just fill them up with water and freeze them. That's the DROS. You're paying for water at an incredible amount of money. So our dollar, our silver, is all the trash and the waste that's thrown into it is the waste, the DROS. Look what God says. If you be willing, obedient, and eat the good of the land, but if you refuse and rebel, you shall be devoured with the sword, and the mouth of the Lord has spoken it. How is it that the faithful city has become a harlot? It was full of judgment and righteousness lodged in it, but now it's full of murderers. Talking about our nation. It was a great nation. We had powerful leaders. What happened to us? It says your silver has become dross. See, our dollar's not worth anything. It's filled with waste. They talk about going back to the gold standard. That's impossible. We have $27 trillion in debt. You're going to have to put that on gold. There's not enough room and space and gold available to make available for gold to cover this. It's impossible. It can't be done. It says the princes are rebellious and the companions of the thieves, and everyone loves gifts. How about that? Follows rewards. They judge not the fatherless, neither they cause the widow to come to them. You talk about what's going on in our society. You notice the people where they have fatherless homes are always the ones in deep despair. And they love to keep them there because it keeps control over those families. God warns that Israel was going to become dross. He says, look at verse 18, Son of man, the house of Israel has become dross. In other words, everything in our society, our nation, it's no good. It's filth. It's waste. Just throw it away. It's just nothing but trash. That's the warning that God says when it comes to this nation. We're going to talk more about that as the time goes on because it's not going to get better, brethren, before Jesus Christ returns. We need to understand that. So now, let's take a break. We're going to come back. We're going to talk about liberal left or political or biblical. But let's take a break. Let's take a watch for PragerU. What can I teach you about racism? I thought this was great that this came out right now because now everything's being presented as a race card again. Take a look. I'll be right back.
Let me tell you how my story ends. I become a tenured, award-winning professor of political science at an Ivy League university and then at one of the leading universities in the South. Now let me tell you how my story begins. I grew up in rural Virginia, literally dirt poor. I dropped out of school in the 8th grade and had 3 children by the time I'm 20. I consider myself to be a reasonably modest person, but even I have to admit that's quite a journey. How did I do it? I worked hard, not crazy 24/7 hard, just hard. I made good decisions, not brilliant 3-dimensional chess decisions, just good ones. I met people along the way who helped me and sincerely wanted to see me succeed. Not because they had something to gain, but because they were decent people. Almost all of these individuals, by the way, were white. But mostly, I think I was blessed in one crucial way. I was born in America, a true land of opportunity for anyone of any color or background. In this country, where you start your life does not determine where you end up. That works in both directions, by the way. You can start out with every advantage and waste them all. Or you can start out with nothing and become a success. It all depends on you. Your attitude is far more important than your race, gender, or social class in determining what you will accomplish in life. When I hear young blacks, or anyone for that matter, talk about systemic racism, I don't know whether to laugh or cry. I want to laugh because it's such nonsense. I want to cry because I know it's pushing untold numbers of young blacks into a dead end of self-pity and despair. Instead of seizing the amazing opportunities America offers them, they seize an excuse to explain why they're not succeeding. I was born into a world where systemic racism was real. No fooling, outright bigotry, back of the bus real. But here's what you need to know. Yes, that racism shaped the Black experience, but even then, it did not define it. Change was in the air. Call it systemic reform. The modern civil rights movement was in its infancy, and the leaders who fought for equal rights for Blacks were men and women of all races. They believed in America and were determined to see it live up to its highest ideals, ideals manifest in the Declaration of Independence and the U.S. Constitution. Did I know growing up that George Washington and Thomas Jefferson owned slaves? I don't think I ever thought about it. If I did, I'd like to think that I would have had enough common sense to know that we can't judge men who lived 250 years ago by the moral standards of our own day. But I know that Jefferson wrote the words in the Declaration of Independence that made slavery ultimately impossible, that all men are created equal. And I know that Washington, Hamilton, Franklin, and Adams and the rest of the founders risked everything to make my world, my America, possible. How could I not be grateful for that and for the sacrifices so many others have made to preserve it? The truth is, I cannot remember a time when I did not love America and feel pride in the belief that I live in the greatest country in the world. I knew if I diligently pursued my ambitions, I could leave the poverty of my early years with all its abuse and depression behind me. I was fortunate in another way. I was spared the life-sapping, negative messages about America that are crippling a generation of young people. These ideas are poison: white privilege, whiteness as a form of property, unconscious racism, reparations, microaggressions, police have it out for Blacks, that the United States was created to protect and promote slavery. These are the ideas young people are told they must accept, and then they're told to reject the ideas that can save them, the antidote, the success principles that enabled me and millions of other Americans to escape lives of poverty. These principles aren't complicated. Work hard, learn from your mistakes, take personal responsibility for your actions. When I made the decisions to get my high school equivalency, attend a community college, and then earn 4 additional college and university degrees, I believed that my education would open doors. And it did. It was only when exposed to academic theories of oppression in graduate school that I was informed that because I was Black, poor, and female, I could never do what I had already accomplished. Thank God it was too late for these toxic messages to stop me. Don't let them stop you. I'm Carol Swain, host of Be the People podcast and retired professor of political science and law at Vanderbilt University for Prager University.
Welcome back. I really thought that was an excellent description of how to overcome some of the negative emotion that's going on around. It's up to the individual, and it always has been, and God says that from the very beginning. Let's take a look at this real fast. The liberal left, is it political or biblical? People don't realize it, but the Bible actually talks about the left. Ecclesiastes 10 says, a wise man's heart is at his right hand, but a fool's heart is at his left. It's amazing how our society is built around the principle of right and left. So he goes on, he says that when a fool walks by the way, his wisdom fails him, and he says to everyone that he is a fool. If the spirit and the ruler rise up against you, leave not your place, for yielding pacifies great offenses. There is an evil which I've seen under the sun, is an error which proceeds from the ruler, talking about the fool. God says, call no man a fool. So what are we looking at here? The fool is the Hebrew word, number 3684, means to be stupid, silly, foolish. Fool is the translation, meaning no wisdom. God says he removes the wisdom of the wise from our nation at the end time. It's used 70 times in the Old Testament alone in all the books of wisdom, except for 3 times in the book of Psalms. Psalm 92 says this, O Lord, how great are thy works, and thy thoughts are very deep. A brutish man knows not, neither does a fool understand this. So now you look at a nation who just continues to remove God from the picture, and God calls that man a fool. God does, not us. He says the fool, the brutish man, he doesn't know what's going on. Only the wise, those who follow God, knows exactly what's going on. So, going on, the liberal left. Look at Isaiah 32, verse 5. This from the King James Version. This is the vile. The word fool is there translated, same word, vile person, shall be no more called liberal. Some translate it noble, nor the churn to be bountiful. Isaiah 32, 5-8 says, no longer will the fool be called noble, nor the scoundrel be highly respected. For fools speak folly at their hearts and are bent on evil. They practice ungodliness and they spread error concerning the Lord. They're hungry to leave the empty, and the thirsty they withhold water. The scoundrels, God used the same word, liberals, use the word methods. They make up evil schemes to destroy the poor with the lies, even when the plea of the needy is just. In other words, they just create lies, and they don't help the poor. They do everything that is ungodly is what they're trying to say. This is in the book of Isaiah through the warnings. But the noble, God says, make noble plans, and the noble deeds they stand. And they base upon biblical principle of God, of what they're talking about here. Now look what Jesus Christ says here, the right and the left. Matthew 25, verse 34 and 41. The king will say to those on his right, come you who are blessed of my Father, take your inheritance, and the kingdom is prepared for you since the creation of the world. Then he will say to those on his left, depart from me, you who are cursed, into eternal fire, prepared for the devil and his angels. So right and left, is it political? No, it's based upon biblical. Amazing how God brings that out. All right, I know I went through that real quick, but I took so much time at the beginning. I had to go through that to try to keep as close as we could to an hour, and I think we went a little bit over. In the mail, I got last week written, but it's actually this week, going out this coming week, our commission by Danny Ellis, and then the sermon that I gave, The Nation That Got What It Asked For, Port 1, in the mail coming out this week, so be on the look for it. Prayer breakfast, this first Sabbath of February. We're asking everybody across the nation, if you can get together with other brethren and have a prayer breakfast, or if you can't get together in the morning, have a prayer meeting, all right? So we need to spend time with one another. We need to pray for the church. We need to pray for our nation. Satan has won a decisive victory in the opening shots in 2021. He has absolutely won an incredible victory. So it's important for you and I and all of God's people to spend time together in prayer before God. So we're getting together here on that day, and we're asking if you can, with the people you meet with all over the nation on that particular day, come together on that day, and let's beseech God for his protection. Beginning of this month, we sent out the quarterly, the magazine, and the sermon, The Breach of American Walls. Again, if you're not on the mailing list, please write in, get on that mailing list so you can get this every single month. We send out a newsletter and a DVD. There we go. In the middle of winter, we're about to finish our program today. As we see here, can't wait till summer. All right, our closing video today. An upbeat, powerful little message. It's only about a minute long. God uses little things. Let's take a look at that video, and I'll be right back to close our program.
From the dust of the ground, God formed man and breathed into him the breath of life. When the Israelites were trapped with their backs to the sea, Moses stretched out his staff and the waters were parted. Samson struck down 1,000 oppressors of Israel with the jawbone of a donkey. At the blast of trumpets and a war cry, Joshua watched the walls of Jericho crumble. With torches and empty jars, Gideon and 300 men defeated an army of 100,000. David chose 5 smooth stones from the stream and with them he struck down Goliath. 5,000 were fed with only 5 loaves and 2 fish. If God can use such small things to change the course of history, certainly he can use you.
Well, that's it for our program. What do you think God's going to do with you? We just one little work, and each one of us is just one little person. But if we hold fast to Jesus Christ, remember what he told us. He says, greater works than these you will do. Hold fast to that. Because you see, God's going to use this work to bring about an end-time warning and a message. And not just us, but all of God's churches, if they hold fast and cry out loudly and boldly the warning of Jesus Christ. All right, that's it for our program this week. We got a lot to talk about. And don't forget, tomorrow, if you don't have a service to go to, tune in. We'll be talking about all the problems that's coming upon this nation and God's people. That's it for this week. And remember to share this with everybody you know. They are going to love you for it. Or not. Till next week, God be with you.